Jot cleared his mind. Now he was ready to grab the fish.
For the last 2 years, the Plucky Squire has been one of my most anticipated games. A while back, I had the opportunity to play the first half of it. It was just enough to pique my interest. My preview left me wondering how the finished product would fare. Would Jot's storybook adventure prove itself worthy of my anticipation, or would it prove to be a disappointment? I played through the entirety of the Plucky Squire on both Steam and PS5. Unfortunately, Switch and Xbox copies weren't available in time for publication of this review. I would have loved to see how the Plucky Squire runs on Nintendo's hybrid console, but I'm fairly optimistic. Across my desktop PC, powered by an NVIDIA RTX 3080, my Steam Deck, and PS5, all possible futures first outing ran smoothly. I experienced occasional stuttering in 3D segments of the game, with none present in the elements of the adventure that took place within the storybook. If you missed our preview, Plucky Squire is, in a nutshell, a game that takes place across the pages of a storybook as well as within the real world. The juxtaposition of wildly different settings and their accompanying art styles is captivating. The Plucky Squire's presentation is its greatest strength. The way All Possible Futures designed it is unlike anything I've experienced before. It's clear great care went into making the majority of the game feel as though it was actually taking place within the pages of a child's storybook. Much of the game is spent slightly zoomed out, looking down at the book as it lay on a desk that's on the edge of the frame, offering the smallest peek at the world outside its pages. Every now and then, items will pop out of the borders of the book and into the real world, or objects from the real world will interact with the pages of the book, reminding you that you're an outsider observing the world on the page. When you escape the pages of the storybook, the Plucky Squire is arguably even more impressive. Segments outside the book are home to some of the most elaborate set pieces in the entire game. The 3D graphics are stunning, with Jot and enemies making a surprisingly faithful transition from their depictions within the book to the real world. These excursions are short in most cases, taking about 15 to 20 minutes to complete before returning to the book to close out the chapter. But I didn't really mind it too much. All Possible Futures did such an amazing job translating the 2D combat system to 3D that I didn't really notice much of a difference between modes from a mechanical perspective. All of Jot's moves translated surprisingly well to a 3D space. I also appreciated the way 3D gameplay sections incorporated 2D elements. Littered around the desk, you'll find scraps of paper, notes, doodles, and other objects Jot can jump into to solve puzzles. If you're familiar with Link's wall merging ability from A Link Between Worlds, imagine that, but taken to new heights. The green portals you can jump into in the 3D sections of the game often see Jot traveling across various different illustrations throughout the space, and moving items from one world to another. I don't think I've seen anything like it before, and it's a gameplay element that I found addictive. I didn't tire of it no matter how many times it was used. Both worlds are bursting with color. Bright greens and yellows complement Jot's vibrant reds so well. I'm not an artist, but it's clear talented art direction was employed in bringing Jot and his companions to life. Speaking of which, Jot is the titular Plucky Squire, an adventurer who seeks to save the land of Mojo from the evil wizard Humgrump. Jot is joined by his two companions, Violet and Thrash, who serve as commentators of sorts throughout the journey. On Jot's quest to defeat Humgrump, he shifts between the pages of his book and the real world to prevent Humgrump from changing the story and making kids all over the world lose interest in the happenings of the land of Mojo. If you've played past 2D Zelda games, the Plucky Squire's inspiration will immediately be clear to you. The core gameplay loop involves fighting monsters, solving puzzles, and defeating bosses. But bosses are nothing like what veterans have come to expect from the Zelda series. Rather than confronting a big bad using a newly acquired skill or tool, the Plucky Squire opts to have Jot battle enemies in unique minigames, like beating down a honey badger in a punch-out style brawl, or rescuing scientists from an alien planet with a jetpack and laser gun. These bite-sized interludes are my favorite moments in the Plucky Squire, seldom making more than one appearance. They underline the amount of effort All Possible Futures put into their debut title. I found myself actively looking forward to each unique encounter as they drew closer. While there are no proper dungeons in the game, the second half does reveal a structured approach to the flow of gameplay. Where the first half serves as an extended tutorial introducing you to the basics of combat and jumping into and out of the book, the second half generally goes a bit like this. You start off each chapter inside the book, reach a certain point, and are advised you'll need to complete an objective out in the real world. You hop out, make your way through a gauntlet of enemies, or complete the occasional stealth sequence, and earn some type of reward at its end. Sometimes that's something like a stamp, which can give you further influence over what happens in the pages of the book, and sometimes it's nothing more than setting you up for the chapter that follows. While I enjoyed the first half of the Plucky Squire, it truly comes alive in its latter half. Having the tools to fully solve puzzles without any help was addictive, especially when you consider the fact that you have the option to flip through the pages of the book to find solutions that exist elsewhere within your active chapter. Jot can manipulate the words in the book by simply picking them up and swapping them. I had so much fun with this mechanic, making giant speakers out of cheese, growing huge lily pads, you name it. While I didn't find any of the Plucky Squire's puzzles challenging per se, I found myself often wanting to experiment with intentionally incorrect answers to see what would happen. And while I didn't always get the result I wanted, it was fun to mess around with. Where combat is concerned, Jot starts off with the ability to swing his sword and jump, though he can learn new abilities by purchasing them from Martina, the shopkeeper. Martina appears at various points throughout each chapter and offers Jot the opportunity to purchase abilities and upgrades. There are 3 abilities in the game, each with 3 upgrades of its own. You can gain a jumping downward slash, a spin attack, and a sword throw. Each of these are handy additions to Jot's arsenal, but I never felt like I absolutely needed any of them to continue on. I'll talk more about difficulty later. First, I should also mention that Martina also sells a unique piece of art at each place she appears throughout the game. These concept art pieces are really well implemented, showing ideas that were scrapped during development and giving background on the history of the game. As of the writing of this review, I haven't found them all, but I will continue to search for them. They're cleverly hidden in places you might not think to look. In some instances, I'd find them by going in an unexpected direction, or hitting trees with Jot's sword. Each time I found one, I felt like I'd discovered something truly interesting about the path that led to the game I was playing. On top of concept art, there are also these little guys. These are glitch birds, and frankly, I'm curious as to what secrets they hold. I've only found 5 so far, and I don't know what will happen when I find them all, but I'm excited to find out. Finding secrets and cutting down enemies wouldn't mean much without a good setting, however, and like any good book, the Plucky Squire excels at world building. Sure, it's a children's book, and sure, it's a pretty simple game, but the world they've built here is so much fun to inhabit. In between gameplay moments, short cutscenes narrated by Philip Bretherton make it feel like a proper book.
This was the house of the good wizard Moonbeard, Jod's close friend and mentor. "Ah, Jot, my lad," he exclaimed. "I'm on a roll here, traveling to new musical realms. Since you're here, lad, I have a small favor to ask." Wax.
I could listen to that all day. During gameplay, every chapter introduces new characters ranging from heavy hitters like Moonbeard the Wizard to smaller bit characters like Floisho, a fish who's searching for his lost love. Everywhere I went, both in Mojo and the world outside, I was constantly meeting new characters, like this bookworm that helps Jot throughout his journey, or this friendly little rocket ship that needs help finding his dad. Every chapter brought with it a new and interesting cast of characters, colorful scenery, and a narrative that had me eagerly awaiting what would appear on the next page. I spent 8 hours with the Plucky Squire, and I enjoyed it. As with Astrobot earlier this month, your mileage may vary, however. The Plucky Squire continues the trend of games with high production values and short run times. Games with a major focus on respecting your time. It's a trend that I appreciate as someone with less free time, but someone might feel that they need a little bit more. For me, the Plucky Squire didn't overstay its welcome. It told the story it wanted to tell and ended when it needed to end. It's a great game, and I'll go back to finding those missing art scrolls and glitchbirds. I had fun on Jot's adventure. It isn't perfect. The final boss fight and ending kinda left me wanting. And I'd have loved to see some of the panning shots in the game exhibit less frame stutter on both PC and PS5, but these are minor issues compared to the overall experience. If you want to try something new, the Plucky Squire is worth your time. It stands among the best indies of this generation, if not of all time. Who knows? Your next favorite book might just be a video game.